Brittney, welcome to Talks with Confina. Thank you for agreeing to have a chat with me. I appreciate your patience in the process of getting this interview together. How you feeling today?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Amazing. Feeling amazing. Just give people a synopsis where you from, how you got started doing what you're doing, so on and so forth.
Okay. I was born in Illinois, in LaGrange. I grew up in a small town or mid-sized town called Westmont, Illinois. We moved around there a little bit when I was a kid, and I spent my high school years in a town called Aurora, Illinois, which is the second largest city in Illinois. So that was kind of my upbringing. I got into law, ironically, on the coattails of my mother. She used to run a organization, faith-based social service agency that started a program called Peer Jury when I was in middle school. And through that, I got to serve as what they called a jury foreman. And so you got to basically adjudicate cases from first-time youth offenders, and then they got community service sentences. And
Okay.
if they completed the community service, then they wouldn't have the offense go on their record.
Okay.
And so I became the jury foreman for that and led the deliberation process, got to go to DC and give a speech to this entire organization for other states that ran similar programs. And it was like the bug kind of hit me, I guess, at that age, and I was infatuated with law. So I got to be sworn into the court as like a little kid, and I just thought it was like the greatest thing in the world. So that's kind of how I got introduced to law and decided that I wanted to do law very, very early.
Okay.
That and watching TV shows like Murder, She Wrote and Matlock, I was like infatuated with those. But after that, it was more of a process of just figuring out what area of law I actually wanted to go into. So after that, and throughout like my entire adolescence and adulthood, it was a matter of figuring out, did I want to do criminal law? Did I want to do entertainment or intellectual property or something like that? And that was like a whole different sort of journey.
It's always cool to hear stories where parents are like the focal point of like the inspo for career choices. So, where did you choose to go to law degree from?
Okay, so my undergrad, my mom had this interesting rule. My mom's a big force in my life, so you hear about her a lot.
Yeah.
But she had a rule that I could not leave the state of Illinois my first year of college. It was a rule for both me and my older brother. And so that was a rule I was not very happy with. So in a bit of rebellion, I decided to go to the local community college because I decided I wasn't going to be staying that long. I was like, fine, you know what? Like it was really going to hurt her.
Yeah, for sure.
So I went to a school called the College of DuPage and got out of there as quickly as I possibly could. Sort of my segue to where I went after that wasn't actually law related, it was cheerleading related. I used to be a competitive gymnast, Olympic level, and had a very, very successful cheerleading career where I walked onto a lot of cheerleading teams because of my tumbling ability. And so the team that I was on at College of DuPage had a connection to Hawaii Pacific University.
Okay.
And so I went to Hawaii to audition or try out for their cheerleading team. And when I got there, completely abandoned that idea and decided I wanted to go to be studious. And I went there to major in international relations and poli-sci.
Okay.
Because initially, I remember I told you there was this journey of trying to figure out what law I wanted to do. There was a period where I wanted to work for like the International Trade Court and do international law, kind of like Amal Clooney. And so I was infatuated with like different cultures and getting to know that. So Hawaii was a really great location for me to go to.
Okay.
So that was the start of sort of my undergrad and kind of getting that touch of legal. I took every legal class you could think of. I took sociology of jurisprudence and criminal law. I took voting rights law. I took literally every legal class you could think of, and I interviewed all of my professors. Flash forward, actually, from when I went to Hawaii Pacific, my mom got sick, so I actually ended up coming back to Chicago and graduating from DePaul University in Chicago. And while I was in DePaul was when I really started to get more of a bigger connection to the legal field and kind of stepped away from that like political aspect.
For sure.
So I actually started doing informational interviews with all of the local firms there. So I remember going to like Morris Brown and Kirkland and Ellis, which were really two very large firms in Chicago. And they actually taught me about intellectual property.
Okay.
So at that time, my mom had gotten sick, and I paid my way through college on my own.
Yeah.
So creatively trying to figure out that. So she had a stroke when I was in Hawaii, and couldn't work. And so then I started taking on a bunch of odd jobs to kind of pay for my college career. And I found out that I really liked business and running businesses because I became a retail store manager to pay for school.
Okay.
And so I wanted to figure out a way to incorporate my love for business with my love for law. And so I learned from Kirkland and Ellis that intellectual property was at that time the fastest growing area of law. And it had a lot to do with business, and every business needs intellectual property. So at that point I decided that I was going to become an intellectual property lawyer. And so yeah, that's kind of how I picked my undergrad and what had my whole story with that. Long-winded, but sorry.
And no, listen, all details are important. I just say because you don't know what options exist until you and their dialogue, you know, what schools offer, stuff like that. I ask these questions because that's important for the kids coming up that might want to pursue what you're pursuing. Just knowing when you went your route, how you got there. Everybody gets there different. So what made you make the switch from, we were talking before the interview, and what made you make the switch from intellectual to entertainment?
So that was a learning process. So when I finally got into law school, your first year of law school are what they call the core classes, or they make up the baby bar. So if anyone's familiar with like Kim Kardashian, the test that she's been taking, that's the baby bar. And so that is all of the subjects that are covered on the bar exam.
Okay.
In most law schools in the United States, you have to pass that exam, or you have to pass your first year of law school, or you can't continue. It's like a pass-fail kind of thing. You'll get dropped from law school. You can't sit for the bar exam unless you pass the equivalent of that test. So during that time, I learned what I didn't like, and I also learned what I was good at by my grades. So you had to take like criminal law, and I was terrible in terms of that. It was so boring to me. I didn't understand why I had to read cases from like 1925 about disproportionate effects on black people. And this is a side note, but it was like I would have moments in class like evidence, and they're like, yeah, so if you run, you're guilty. And it's like a case from like the 1920s, and the person running is a black person. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Can you explain to me
the relevance?
why this is the case? And I remember having friends come up to me and go, you seem like you're really struggling in this class. I was like, no, I understand it perfectly. I don't agree with it. So I decided I didn't like criminal law, and there were other classes like that I decided I didn't like. And what I discovered that I was actually really good at were classes like constitutional law and contracts. I did very, very well in contracts. So with that knowledge, I went into my second year selecting the courses or your electives that you want to take. And so I started focusing on the area that I wanted to, which was intellectual property, as well as the classes that I was really strong in. So I took trademark law. I helped start a trademark clinic at my law school, where we got to file trademarks for small businesses. I then also took, different forms of contracts, so business law and contracts. I didn't take copyright back then, but I did take trade secret law and several other classes related to that, because that was the time that we got to choose. And I just started to kind of see the relationship between intellectual property and other aspects of the industry. So I started to see how intellectual property works with general business or commercial litigation. And then I also learned how it fits into sort of the music industry and other industries. And I had a music background, so I used to sing and things like that. So I wanted to I'm always trying to figure out how I can merge things together. That's kind of my personality. So just like when I was an undergrad, how can I merge business with law? It was kind of that same thought process for me. How can I merge intellectual property with entertainment, and then it was kind of just sort of a gradual finding my home through different jobs after that.
Okay, dope.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always like you always go to one place before you get to another. It's always like that. Like, yeah, that's not it. That's not it. That's not gonna work.
Exactly.
I'm cool off that. We always have. Life is very much transitional in that way. We start firm on things, and things happen in our lives that causes us, like your mother getting ill, and you having to come back home to caretake for her, and still have to go to school and still work. So like we find our way through it, and then we kind of find our way to our purpose and our plan. So, you recently just relocated.
I did.
To Atlanta. Let's talk about that. Like, what inspired the move? Where did you move from?
Okay. I moved from Los Angeles. I lived there from 2008, I want to say. 2008 or 2009, I'm not quite sure at this point. You lose track of time as you age. But around 2009, and I was living there up until October of last year.
For sure.
I bounced around different parts of Cali, so I started off in San Diego and moved to LA. But yeah, so I migrated there after college. I went to law school there. And had my first couple of legal jobs there. As eventually, when I got into entertainment law, I had moved from San Diego to LA. So I sort of did this soul searching, because I had this neat plan in my head of how I was going to segue into entertainment law.
Yeah.
Because when I graduated, nothing ever happens exactly how you plan it out, and you don't actually get to do exactly what you want to do.
Absolutely.
So I ended up in employment law, and started doing product liability. And I had this idea. So in employment law is very similar to a lot of entertainment, if you think about it, because all of the contracts for entertainment are pretty much employment contracts. Just with different terms, and they'll have a touch of intellectual property in them. So I had this like creative idea, like, because there wasn't a lot of entertainment in San Diego, I'm going to do employment law because that's the first job I was offered. And I'm just going to have this nice little segue to intellectual property and trade secrets and all that kind of stuff later. And it just never went that way. I started doing product liability, and then I started getting pigeonholed into this really crappy area of law called lemon law. Yeah. And I was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. Like, it's mind-numbingly boring. And I was like, my soul is dying.
What's going on? It's Jacob with Talks with Cone. Thank you so much for liking and subscribing to the channel. We got new episodes premiering every Friday, so tune in and stay locked in with Talks with Cone. Peace.